And that's what climate change is about. It is literally, not figuratively, a clear and present danger.
We are in the beginning of a mass extinction.
The ability of CO2 to do the heavy work of creating a climate catastrophe is almost nil at this point.
The price of oil has been artificially elevated to the point of insanity.
That's not how you power a modern industrial system.
The ultimate goal of this renewable energy, plan is to reach the exact same point that we're at now.
You know who's tried that? Germany. 7 straight days of no wind for Germany. Their factories are shutting down.
They really do act like weather didn't happen prior to 1910.
Today is Friday.
That's right, Greta, you pint-sized protagonist. It is Friday, and this is our own personal Friday protest, now under a brand new name, the Climate Realism Show. Episode number 100, because we're not getting rid of all the other shows under the old name. And this one is going to be on ESG. Is it on the outs? And we have a discussion with a very special expert, one of the top in the country on that topic. And so we're looking forward to having him on the show. My name is Jim Lakely. I'm the Director of Communications and also the Vice President of the Heartland Institute. And joining me today, we do have our regular panelists, minus one. We have Dr. H. Sterling Burnett. He's the Director of the Arthur B. Robinson Center at the Heartland Institute on Climate and Energy Policy. And we also have Linnea Lueken. She's a research fellow at the Robinson Center at the Heartland Institute. And Anthony Watts, he's having some technical difficulties, so he will not be your host today. That will instead be me. And also joining us is Don Harrison of the Capitalist Investment Services, who will be on to discuss our main topic today on why ESG, it seems, is starting to fail. Welcome, everybody. Glad to see you all.
Thanks for having me.
Yep. Good to be back.
That's good. Well, we're going to start off the show as we do most shows with Anthony Watts's favorite feature, and that is the crazy climate news of the week. This stuff, if it doesn't make your eyes roll and your belly chuckle, then you're probably watching the wrong show. Let's go to the first one, which is one of my favorite topics, and that is news that Apple is killing its electric car project. The car, in this story from the New York Times, which Apple spent billions of dollars researching, had been intended to be a rival to Elon Musk's Tesla electric vehicles, and it was going to include a lot of autonomous driving features. Well, they have canceled that plan after billions of dollars. I guess if you are the most capitalized corporation in the history of human civilization, tossing a few billions on a dumb idea like an electric vehicle is just no big deal. This was a secretive product that apparently had been in the work for nearly a decade. And the company told employees in an internal meeting on Tuesday that it had scrapped the project and that members of the group would be shifted into different roles, including Apple's artificial intelligence division, which is obviously a big growth sector these days. And so Apple, but though declined to comment. Again, they never officially said that they were developing an electric car, but everyone in the company knew it. It was the worst kept secret in Silicon Valley. And Apple's cars were out there testing on the roads, and people were wondering what was going on. So one of the reasons Apple, of course, they're in the entertainment business now with their Apple Plus TV service, and they're also making movies and stuff. But Tim Cook, who took over obviously for the genius Steve Jobs, he wanted to make an electric car because he wanted to make his own mark on the world the way his predecessor did. Because if you think about it, Apple hasn't really been a very innovative company ever since Steve Jobs passed away. Sorry, Tim Cook, you may be one of the world's wealthiest men, but you are not one of the world's greatest CEOs. Guys, I know that you love ripping on EVs almost as much as I do. Well, go ahead.
I'm going to address what you said at the last. I'm not an iPhone user, but I take it the iPhones are pretty innovative. I keep hearing about the iPhones, what great they are. So I guess they're doing something right. But if Apple, of all the companies in the world, can't figure it out how to make this stuff work, then it tells you there's problems. The same week this happens, I don't know how close you watch the news, Rivian, another breakthrough company, Rivian, going to have this great truck. I've seen the Rivian trucks. looking trucks. They actually look like pickups,
Mhm.
And I've heard their performance is not too bad. Their reliability is awful, and they're bleeding money. And there's at least some speculation that it may be a penny stock soon. They are bleeding money. Their investors are pulling out. I think Google put a lot of money into Rivian. Google is another big company. They haven't figured it out. So it's one domino after another for EVs, whether it's burning buses, scooters catching fire in New York, companies losing money hand over fist, the Chinese about to take over the market with Biden's help, no less. The EV bubble is long overdue for bursting. And the truth is, when it does, we'll all benefit, because then we can go back to sanity and buying the cars that actually function and get us where we want to go with the power we need to haul things and to take vacations and not run out of power and block highways, unable to fuel our vehicle.
Yeah.
My only question would be whether or not these cars would slowly start to have major mechanical errors every time there's an update,
Oh my God.
forcing you to buy a new one every time they roll a new model out.
Yeah.
Or at least bring it into the dealership and have the diagnostics run or buy a new $5,000 computer module. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, or you get up in the morning to go to work and it turns out your car's downloaded an update overnight and it's got to take a chance to load and function. And so you're just sitting there as your bosses say, why are you late? Oh, my car's updating.
Yeah. Rebooting your car at 60 miles an hour on the freeway is probably not a very good idea. All right.
To comment a couple things that Sterling said, you asked about, you don't have an iPhone and are they innovative anymore? And I do have one and have had one for years. And I would say they're not particularly innovative. It seems to me that most of the, new features are just things to add complications and make you get a new phone. And then you were talking about Rivian. I didn't even know what they were until about 8 or 9 months ago. And I happened to be sitting in traffic behind one. And within a week or so, I was at a party and I was talking to a young man, blue collar guy, nice guy, very friendly. And he was all excited because he was going to work for Rivian. And by that time, I had done a little research and knew what it was. And I really didn't have the heart to tell him that he was probably going to be out of a job within a year or two. He was so excited and helping to change the world. And I just said, good for you. And, let it go with that.
Yeah, they laid off more than 10% of their workforce this week, mostly in San Francisco, I believe. It's amazing. Like I said, I actually thought the Rivian looked pretty good. I haven't seen the performance.
Yeah, it's a nice look. I thought it was a nice looking car.
But they say that it's got really it's in the bottom 5 of reliability of cars on the road, and just for chuckles, I keep hoping that the market will collapse so bad I can pick one up on the cheap. So I went online last night to Auto Trader and a few other sites. I don't know what Rivians sell for new, but they were the used ones were selling for 68, 72, 90,000. It's like, no, I can buy a brand new, almost anything that I would like pickup truck wise for half that. That's crazy.
You can get a Mercedes for that price, Sterling.
Yeah. And that's the used ones. And since we're already being told they actually don't work that well, they're unreliable, that market's got to bottom out sometime. And when it does, when they say Rivian for sale $20, I'm going to pick one up just so I can have it in my driveway.
Yeah.
Well, do you all know what the term cigar butt means in the investment world? Have you ever heard that expression? Nope. Ben Graham coined that, I think, back in the 30s, and Warren Buffett has used it quite a bit. And it basically, Graham said that a cigar butt that you find in the gutter has value if you can get it at the right price. So, Sterling, hopefully at some time you'll be able to get your Rivian at cigar butt prices, and then it may have some value.
Yeah, there
Fantastic.
You go. All someone has to do is abandon one by the side of the road and leave the title in the window so I can sign it over to myself.
Very good. Very good. Okay, let's move on to our next story from the American Spectator. Environmentalists fail again. Plastic bag ban made pollution worse. So, of course, now they want to double down, by Stephen Greenhut, who I actually know personally. Sterling, I know this is one of your favorite topics. You've written about this a lot over the years.
Yeah.
But California's environmental-friendly lawmakers were quite proud of themselves when in 2014 they passed a first-in-the-nation ban on stores from handing out so-called single-use plastic bags as a mean to turn back the tide, so to speak, on an ocean pollution crisis that was threatening marine wildlife and supposedly turning our beaches into waste dumps. So they got the law passed, and despite shoppers were complaining about the annoyance of schlepping old bags and then slow down the checkout process as cashiers were having to question them, how many bags do you want to buy, rather than just bagging up the groceries quickly and efficiently. And every time I go to the grocery store, I always forget our reusable plastic bags as well. So I end up getting more of the old ones. But anyway, according to the Los Angeles Times, and according to a report by the consumer advocacy group CalPERG, 157,385 tons of plastic bag waste was discarded in California the year the law passed. But by 2022, however, the tonnage of discarded plastic bags had skyrocketed to 231,072, a 47% jump in plastic bag waste. Even accounting for an increase in population, the number rose from 4.8 tons per 1,000 Californians in 2014 to 5.89 tons per 1,000 Californians in 2022. Sterling?
Well, first off, the population is misleading. That's gone down.
Right.
Their population has declined. It's not increasing.
Sure.
So the waste per person has gone up.
Right.
And as you say, look, I wrote about this before I joined Heartland Institute. I did studies on this at a different think tank. And the evidence existed before the first city in the United States passed the first bag ban. Scotland had done this, and they found that waste increased. Why? Well, first off, I think the bag manufacturers, the U.S. dominates the single-use bag market. They're all produced here. China dominates the reusable bag market. So when we shut down plastic bags here, we're helping China. More good industrial policy. But in any case, the plastic manufacturers made a horrible marketing decision and allowed them to be called single-use plastic bags. Most people I know, including myself, use them for multiple things after they've gotten their groceries home. Mm-hmm. Most often, they use them to line their trash bins in their bathrooms and guest rooms, whatever. So they get at least two uses. If you're like me and you have a lot of used books that sometimes you take to the bookstores so you can get more books, much to my wife's chagrin, you also use them. But the point is, they don't have to be single use, and they most often aren't. So what happened is people said, okay, we still have to put something in those trash bins. So now rather than getting a free bag at the end of your grocery, you go and buy heavier, thicker plastic bags. So that increases the weight of the trash waste. That's what's happening. It was predicted. If Scotland showed that it happened, I predicted it a decade ago. It has other untoward, New Jersey did this as well. We wrote about this week in Environment Climate News. Linnea wrote a story. And New Jersey actually passed it and put theirs on hold during the pandemic. Why? Well, public health. It turns out that the plastic bags are pretty pretty safe. But reusable bags, on the other hand, you either clean them regularly. With the plastic ones, it doesn't go so well. With the cloth ones, you can, but it shortens their lives dramatically. But most people don't do that. They get their groceries home and they put it back in their car so they won't forget it the next time they go to the grocery store. So whatever microbes from your groceries were on there are now in that bag. And if you had meat, something leaking, you could be growing mold. And so they found that these bags were making people sick. And so New Jersey said, well, no, during the pandemic, no, we're going to keep, you can keep using plastic bags because while we're in a pandemic, we care about your health. But as soon as the pandemic was over, they stopped caring about the health again.
Right.
So it was never a good idea. The government never had any business telling people what they could use to carry their groceries home in. It increased the destruction of trees because paper bags came back. It helped China. It hurt the U.S. and it didn't make a dent. You know, you mentioned in the story, oh, we're producing plastic waste in the oceans. The plastic waste in the oceans isn't from plastic bags in the U.S. The plastic waste in the oceans is from China, India, and oceanic countries where fishing trawler nets are being abandoned, where trash is running out of their rivers into the open ocean. Not from our plastic bags. Those big, you know, they talk about, what are they talking about? The floating plastic islands out there that they're trying to scoop up. Those don't consist of U.S. plastic bags.
Yeah. Well, Sterling, you described it as harming Americans, helping China, and actually making the problem worse. And you've just described 99.9% of all green initiatives. So congratulations.
Yeah, has there ever been a green initiative that has not had multitudes of unintended consequences?
I can't think of one. Nope. All right, let's move on. We have a fun story. Linnea, you're going to be the one. I'm teeing this up for you. Green billionaires press Hollywood to promote Armageddon climate messages in movies. Oh my gosh. You know, it really has been a shame that we never see any climate alarmist messaging in Hollywood these days, you know? So we need green billionaires to pour money into discreet campaigns. Isn't that funny? Discreet campaigns to persuade Hollywood writers to catastrophize the climate in future film and television scripts. I guess they forgot about the movie The Day After Tomorrow. I guess they forgot about giving Al Gore an Oscar for his for documentary film, but it was actually fiction. Called An Inconvenient Truth. They forgot about that show that was on Netflix, or the movie that was on Netflix. Gosh, it was just out. It had Leo DiCaprio in it. It had all these Hollywood stars. Oh yeah, Don't Look Up. That was what it was called, about another climate catastrophe. You know, Linnea, how are you going to get by without Hollywood indoctrinating everybody on climate alarmism? Because we certainly don't get enough of it.
I don't know. They certainly sneak it into a lot of movies that otherwise have absolutely nothing to do with it. I remember a couple of years ago, I pulled up a movie because I'm a fan of this series of movies called The Cloverfield Paradox.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
And
I like
the
that.
premise, yeah, it's kind of like Baby's first Event Horizon. And the backdrop for that movie is like climate change destroys the planet, and that's why we're looking to do interstellar travel. And it's wasn't expecting it, popped out of nowhere. They mentioned it in the first 2 minutes of the movie and then never mentioned it again. And that seems to happen in all sorts of TV shows now. There was a TV show called the I think the Santa Clarita Diet, which is about zombies. And and that one had an episode where the daughter of the main character went and protested a new fracking well in Santa Barbara or something. And so, yeah, it was, it's all over the place. And I'm not really sure why this is news at all, but it is funny that it's getting covered.
Well, I mean, it's been going on for a long time. It's not just in movies, right? I wasn't a kid, but I'm thinking 20 years ago, maybe 25 years ago, there was what I think was a relatively popular cartoon called Captain Planet.
Yep.
So this has been going on for a while. And it's always been indoctrination. You get the kids, you tell them, you say, Mommy, why aren't you recycling? Mommy, why are you eating meat? I would tell kids that I know, oh, you're worried about the climate change? Well, give me your cell phone because you shouldn't be charging that. Let me have your iPad.
Right.
Suddenly make the sacrifice. You think this is a problem, make the sacrifice to save the planet. If not, don't talk to me about it anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, NBC used to have, if you guys remember, they would have Green Week, and they would replace their little peacock logo on the bottom, and they would make it all green. And the show 30 Rock actually made a joke out of it, and they made fun of the whole idea, which I gave them a lot of credit for. But yeah, people in the chat, you can drop in your thoughts and your remembrances of overtly, sledgehammer-like messaging in our popular culture about climate alarmism, because it literally is dropped in everywhere. The idea that we don't have enough of that in Hollywood, and that's what people want, is more climate messaging, is absolutely absurd. So, all right. So now we're going to go to a story on a website that is called Climate Realism, which also happens to be the name of the show, the Climate Realism Show. What do you know? Good coincidence. This was by Kip Hansen, and this is the website. Climate Realism is where the Heartland Institute is several times a week, just about every day, finds a climate alarmist story, speaking of having it flood the zone everywhere you look, and counters the climate alarmism with actual facts and data. And definitely be bookmarking that website and check it out daily, because it's got what you need for the counter spin. The story is, no, New York Times, climate change is not targeting animal sanctuaries. Again, add that to the extremely long list of things, good things on the earth that climate change is ruining. And Kip Hansen, the author, says, seldom does a New York Times cover any story that he can physically fact check. And in this case today, was the object of the story was close enough for him to visit and take photos. The sad tale recounted in the piece of the New York Times said sanctuaries can protect animals from abuse, but not from climate change. A growing number of animal refuges are being forced to move in the face of extreme rainfall, droughts, and hurricanes caused by the planet's warming. And then we're going to scroll all the way down here to the bottom and let you guys comment on it, because we kind of have the summary of it down there. The bottom lines is that the featured Catskill Animal Sanctuary has found that it made a poor choice in its property purchase in 2002, failing to inquire about how long-term weather conditions might affect the land. Golly, buyer beware, I suppose. If the owners had asked the local experts, advice is provided for free by various levels of government, and they would have known that land would be boggy in wet years. And the reason they have to move is not down to climate change. The local climate has not changed. They must move because of geography and geology, both of which they should have studied at school. And of course, it's just overall false that the increasing numbers of animal sanctuaries have been forced to move because of climate change. The idea has just been entirely invented by the New York Times journalist. So, guys, even the poor animals in a sanctuary, New York Times claims that there is no sanctuary from catastrophic climate change, but of course, we just debunked that.
Well, when I heard that sanctuaries were having to move because of hurricanes, I thought, well, hold it. Were the sanctuaries in a known hurricane zone already? If you set up a sanctuary in Florida or Galveston, Texas, you're going to be hit by hurricanes, folks. That's the history of those locations. Now, if I find out that hurricanes are suddenly striking animal sanctuaries in Kansas, then I'd say, well, maybe climate change has something to do with that poor sanctuary getting whacked by a hurricane in the middle of a landlocked area. People are idiots.
Yeah.
It just amazes me when you're talking about, the increasing severity of hurricanes and tornadoes and whatnot. That's very easily checkable and easily researched. I mean, it's the most easily refutable claim that the other side makes. It just, listen, some of these things are very technical, but that's not. It's very easily measurable.
Yeah. All right. Well, moving along, because we have quite a list here. We're going to move on to a story from What's Up With That, which is run by our very own Anthony Watts. And it's titled, He Considers Joe Biden a Type of Right-Wing Climate Realist. Now, you might be wondering, who in the world would call Joe Biden, who just called climate realist Neanderthals, by the way, who would think of Joe Biden as some kind of right-wing climate realist? Well, the person who said that was Ajay Singh Choudhary in his new book, The Exhausted Earth. He says that he considers Joe Biden a type of right-wing climate realist, although I will give him credit for calling us climate realists and not deniers. So we're making progress, fellas. Among the U.S. president's most important climate policies is not just the Inflation Reduction Act, but also U.S. national security strategy. And Choudhury argues that it's insanely jingoistic. And ultimately, right-wing climate realists, I suppose like Joe Biden, know that there will be instability and they are preparing for it. Wow. I mean, Joe Biden does not seem to care what kind of radical leftist green climate policies he puts in place. He doesn't care how that affects ordinary Americans in the pocketbook and eliminating their jobs. Yet he is somehow a right-wing climate realist. And Linnea, that sounds a little nuts.
Well, it is a little bit nuts. It's a lot of bit nuts. Well, gosh, I mean, just attempting to put yourself into a position where Joe Biden is to the right of you is something that's a little bit.
That's not easy to do. That does take some doing. I will give him that.
So, yeah. Well, I guess I don't know. I guess it depends on the day, and it depends on how Joe Biden is feeling.
Yeah.
He kind of tends to drift with the wind a little bit. So, there's really not much I can say on this one, Jim.
Yeah, we're just bringing it to you so you people know that this happened. Yes. All right. Next story. The state of New York. The Attorney General in New York is going to be suing a beef producer.
Yeah.
Letitia James, fresh off going after Donald Trump and imposing a $400 million fine upon him for a crime that doesn't exist. She filed a lawsuit against JBS USA Food Company and JBS USA Food Company Holdings, who is the American subsidiary of the world's largest producer of beef products, for misleading the public about its environmental impact. JBS USA has claimed that it will achieve net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2040, despite documented plans to increase production and therefore increase its carbon footprint. Don, actually, I'm going to go to you on this one. Since this is a major corporation and you look into investments, I mean, the idea that you could sue a company for lying about the impact of its product on the environment when those impacts are impossible to determine, for one. But I think this might even get into our main topic today of ESG stuff. It's like maybe you get some ESG points when you go after legal and needed industries like the beef industry in the United States.
Yeah, you might. And I noticed down below here, you have greenwashing and finance, Deutsche Bank. And it's funny, I was just thinking about that this morning, and I was going to mention it, but I didn't exactly remember the details. So you've got it up here. Yeah, they were supposedly promoting ESG funds that weren't ESG at all. And I don't think I think they lost a lawsuit to the tune of about $70 million, if I remember correctly.
Oh, that's nice. All right.
Yeah, we will talk about greenwashing a little bit.
We will
later. Yeah, it's on the agenda.
New York sued Big Oil. At least in their first battles, they lost. But I think they still got another lawsuit going forward on different grounds. She sued Trump. People are dying. They have an invasion. All sorts of things are going on in New York that she could be focused on, but she's focused on non-crimes. And now she's going after a big beef, right? The largest beef producer, based on what they might be doing in the future and what their impact might be when the EPA shows that beef's impact on their emissions are, I think, 3% of U.S. emissions, which are declining. So they're negligible, even if you thought, CO2 was causing dangerous climate change, which of course we dispute. She just won in a number of big city mayors or big state mayors in this case, with a lot of problems, huge budget deficits. I mean, remember, they're losing population too in New York. People are leaving. They're taxing their wealthy people out of state, moving them out of state. They're going to close down their pizza kitchens that New York is fairly famous for. They're making life there so much worse. And so they've got to bring some money in. This is all lawfare.
Yeah.
It's what's behind Chicago's lawsuit with big oil. It's what's behind so many of these lawsuits. It's just we need a new source of income. We're not able to tax people fast enough to pay for our big expansion of big government. And so we need a new source of income. And so they're looking, who can we blame? I guess evidently big beef is now the problem.
Well, and you know, we're laughing about this and at the absurdity of it, but it's actually really frightening because it shows you that anyone can be sued for anything in the name of climate change. And actually, I wrote a blog post a couple of 3-4 weeks ago on our heartofliberty.com website, and it was about the rule that Biden put in place back at the beginning of last year that now allows ESG mutual funds in 401k plans. But by the time I got to the end of it, the conclusion that I had come to was that if, and this is a very big if, and I put that in large capital letters, if you believe that CO2 is going to cause apocalyptic climate change, then anything is not only possible, but necessary in terms of lawsuits, in terms of new laws. I mean, I came to the conclusion that at some point in time, all investing will be mandated to be ESG if more and more people continue to believe that.
Well, it's no coincidence that the people that multiple presidents have had working their climate issues, right? Going back to Clinton, you skip Trump. I don't think Bush, George W. had a climate czar, but you have these positions that basically are referred to as climate czars.
Yeah.
Well, you know, I look back at history, and you know, Tsar Nicholas may have been an okay guy in comparison to Stalin, but czars are authoritarians. They're dictators. They do bad things to people. They don't care much about average folk. And that's what the climate czars that this administration and previous Democratic administrations have had prove day after day. They want to dictate industrial policy. I can't hear Jim.
Because I was muted. Geez, I do that once a podcast. I was going to say that was a great segue into our special guest, Don Harrison, today to talk about ESG. You could call it woke investing in a certain respect. I mean, ESG stands for environmental, social, and governance. And it's basically the enforcement of left-wing ideology into the financial space. Because they apparently don't think they're doing fast enough. They're not doing enough to just crush our liberty and economy through the government. We have to make sure that we do it in the private sector as well. So it's the idea, and Donnie's here to talk about this. We can get into it. We can do a brief explanation of what ESG is, but it's sold to the public as quote unquote sustainable investing. In other words, investing in companies and projects that do not harm the earth or that help mitigate the emissions of carbon dioxide and all sorts of other things like that. So, Don Harrison, why are you such an expert on ESG that we brought you on the show today?
Well, I've spent about, I think, the last 8 or 9 months on top of my normal job as a financial advisor and a business owner, working on this project and exploring the ins and outs of ESG and talking to many different investment management organizations. Just a little bit of background. I've been in the investment business since 1981. I started with E.F. Hutton, and I think the only one of you three who, if I said, "Are you listening?" I think the only one who would get that would be Sterling. Okay, maybe Jim. I sure didn't expect Linnea to get that joke. But anyway, I broke off for my own company in 2001, Capitalist Investment Services, and we use Raymond James Financial Services as our broker dealer. But about a year and a half ago, I had a couple of clients around the same time come to me and ask about ESG investing. So I was not, I knew what the name meant. To be perfectly honest with you, I was not that familiar with it. So I did a little investigation, I figured out what it was, came back to them with some funds they could use. But it occurred to me at the time that this was not a type of investing that obviously I agreed with. and that there was a large portion of the population who were on the same side of the aisle that I was. So my initial thought was to, I'll just go and research investment management organizations, mutual fund and ETF companies who are not involved in ESG. And then we'll just use those and I'll plug those into my normal asset allocation portfolios, growth or growth with income. Well, it turned out to be a heck of a lot harder than I thought. And, I'm happy I did it, but it was quite a labor, because what I discovered was that it is not just the funds that are labeled ESG. ESG is deeply intertwined in, I think I can safely say, the majority of investment management outfits out there.
Right.
So I started this in order to give people a real choice to allow them to invest with companies which have minimal ESG involvement. I use that term very deliberately because it is difficult to find ones that are absolutely squeaky clean on this subject. That's me. You can we do have a website for this, heartofliberty.com. You can read some more about it. And we just got this started 5 or 6 weeks ago. But I do have a couple of blog posts as I mentioned. If you want to flip to, that's the standard disclaimers there. As I said, the purpose of this is to give investors a choice. And I purposely, if you see this here, put the E in red. I'm really focused, as I think most everybody else here on this show is, on the environmental side of things. I didn't really have the resources to get into the DEI weeds at the moment. So we want to give investors a choice. And we also want to persuade investment companies to change their ESG policies. And I think most of you are certainly aware that over the past 5 or 6 months, especially, there have been a few changes with regards to what BlackRock is doing, what State Street is doing. I think State Street and another outfit just pulled out of a climate change initiative that they have been a member of. So there is some progress. And I actually think, we talk about this a little bit later, investment management companies are becoming more and more sensitive to this, even though there has not been an enormous amount of pushback. And I will also say that I have discussed this with friends and clients who are conservatives, who are pretty well-read and well-informed. And I would say that 99 out of 100 have no idea what it is and have no idea that the mutual funds that they are investing with, that there's a good chance that they're possibly involved with.
Yeah. I mean, I think I'll try to share this on the stage here, Andy. This tweet came over today, actually. Breaking. BlackRock has admitted that their core business could be, quote, materially adversely affected, unquote, by CEO Larry Fink's continued ESG activism, citing it as a key risk factor in their annual filing with the SEC. That is just the latest little bit of data point that we've seen over the last, really just, I think, maybe the last 6-9 months, in which ESG was the future. ESG was the only way you were going to be able to invest. ESG was a winner. And all the people that were investing in traditional companies or were interested in making money, they were going to be on the outs, and ESG was on the way in. And it seems, Don, that you can't create a market, just as very much like EVs. You can't create a market that doesn't exist, and you can't make ESG sustainable investing profitable, because it just can't be. You can't will your agenda into existence. And I think Larry Fink is among those who is probably talking a little less about ESG, or at least not as loudly. You would have to do like E.F. Hutton and really lean in to hear him talking about ESG. But are we correct to surmise that the ESG push was a fad and maybe it's starting to fade away?
I'm going to say yes. I mean, I certainly think it's a fad. And a little bit later, I'll go through how I've categorized different mutual funds involvement in this. But I would say the support for this, there's some investment management organizations that are all in and are true believers. But I would say that in general, the support for this is a mile wide and an inch deep. And that's why I think you've seen in the case of BlackRock, and Vanguard, for example, some backtracking on this.
But can I interject? You know, you mentioned it about 9 months ago. It looked inevitable. Look, we put out a study that I thought was a great study, and we examined it. We also worked with legislators in states. Part of the pushback is coming from states that we've worked with,
right?
Where they're saying you can't do business here in certain ways. You can't manage our funds if you're going to rule out whole industries. What portfolio management has shown over time is that diversified portfolios do better than portfolios that are not diversified or that are shaped for political considerations other than making a profit, returning profit to the owners, the funds. And ESG necessarily restricts and limits and reduces the diversity of their funds. And so company after company is losing its shirt. BlackRock has closed several of their ESG funds. Other companies have as well. Now, that doesn't mean they're giving up. You listen to someone like Larry Fink and he says, oh, it's a marketing problem. We got to get away from ESG. We need a new term. It's all about the language.
It's about framing.
Yeah, if you just framed it right, it would still be good. No, it's bad because it's a money loser. People are going to retire one day and they're going to have less money in their funds than they would otherwise have had these guys not decided that equity was more important than profit, their version of equity, that diversity was more important than profits, their version of diversity, that sustainability, their version is more important than profits. Sorry, the only thing I as a retiree care about is maximizing my return so that when I retire, I can be comfortable. And right now, I wish my dog would shut up, but that's another story.
I'm going to disagree with Sterling a little bit in that I think that the larger danger in ESG is that it's going to make us all poorer. You may see ESG funds that for a time outperform other funds. I mean, let's face it, if the government is subsidizing some of these industries, if they are skewing regulations to support these industries, they're going to do well for a while. But what this forces us to do is, as does so much of the climate agenda, is to, rather than have economic growth that comes from productivity growth, where we're able to do more from less, this causes us to be able to do less with more input. And I think in the long run, you're going to have lower rates of return for everybody, whether you're in an ESG fund or not. I think it's a mistake to oppose this just because the funds might underperform. I mean, I've seen studies on both sides of the aisle. Supporters of it saying, oh, these funds have done well. People who oppose it saying, oh, no, look at this. And the studies aren't very good on either side. They cherry pick. But so I think there's I think there's a much bigger issue than just the performance of the funds.
Well, but I guess I don't know that we necessarily disagree, but my biggest issue is this: I don't care what Larry Fink or the heads of any of these people care about. They have issues. They can take all the money that they make and invest it in whatever they want to. That's their money. With my money, I care about one thing: return on investment. Minimizing my losses, maximizing my gains. And political investments don't do that over the long term.
And I agree with you 100%. I've made it a point since the late 80s of not investing in anything that has heavy government subsidized. I got into the business when real estate partnerships were a big deal because of the tax benefits in the late 80s. And when Reagan changed the tax laws, suddenly you had what nearby here in Northern Virginia were called see-through office buildings. They were just completely empty. It's a function of the values of those properties had been propped up by the tax laws.
Well, Don, you had a presentation here with were there other points you wanted to make in that PowerPoint?
Yeah, sure. If you want to bring it back up, and I'll flip through because I know we're not going to be here, till dinner time. We and I'll go through this very quickly. I sent out questionnaires to a couple of hundred different mutual fund companies. Some actually, only a few, refused to answer the questionnaire, but we ended up using 5 different criteria to evaluate a investment management organization's involvement in ESG. Number one, the depth to which ESG infuses a company's investment process, not just with ESG funds. That's really a separate issue. I'm of the same opinion as Steve Moore, that if a fund company wants to offer an ESG fund targeted at that specific market, that's fine. It's when it infuses the whole process in every fund they offer. Number 2, we looked at the involvement of ESG dedicated staff. If you have staff, they're going to try to expand their power base, and it's going to become more and more of an important part of the organization. The company's published belief in catastrophic man-made climate change. And then the last, number 4 and 5, I think are the most important: their membership in various climate change initiatives and their proxy voting record. Their proxy voting record is not just talk, it is actual, it is an action that they have taken that affects companies and affects the economy. And I've leaned very heavily on the Committee to Unleash Prosperity. I don't know if you're familiar with that, with their pension politics website for evaluating that aspect, proxy voting record. This is what I was referring to earlier. In talking with companies, I've kind of come to categorize them in 6 or 7 different ways. Number 1, the true believers. They're ones who are all in, and I probably would have categorized BlackRock in that fashion 6 or 8 months ago. We have the greenwashers. We talked about Deutsche Bank. They're basically using this as a marketing ploy, and they are not even really very deeply involved. Then we have marketers who have got into this, not quite greenwashers. They do have staff, but they don't really believe in it. It's just a marketing opportunity. This is number 4 is one of the more interesting ones, ESG by proxy. I was actually very surprised to find when I started this process, I deal with a number of smaller and mid-sized investment management organizations. And when I talked to them initially, a lot of them said, oh, we have no involvement in ESG whatsoever. I said, great. These are fund companies. I know they have excellent funds. Well, when they filled out my questionnaire, they got to the proxy voting part, or when I looked at their evaluation from pension politics, they got very poor grade. And the reason was, and I see Sterling's kind of smiling here, so maybe he knows what I'm about to say, they allowed the proxy services to do their proxy voting for them. And when I brought this up to a number of these, it was a real irritant. They're smaller outfits. They don't want to have to do it on their own. But what I pointed out was you can instruct the proxy voting service to vote with management every single time unless we tell you differently. And it's been a source of contention, but I think that is something that some of these outfits will change. The other, number 5, is actually kind of sad. These are smaller and mid-sized management organizations that do not want to do this and have been coerced into it. They have either lost large clients or they're in danger of losing large clients, and essentially seriously hurting their organization, causing them to have to lay people off. There is quite a bit of that. And then finally, you have the ones who are truly either absolutely squeaky clean or have very minimal ESG involvement. And this is, I found there's a contradiction when it comes to ESG in many investment management organizations' processes. On the one hand, they will have a process for selecting securities. They will have different metrics that they use, and they test that against history. They test it against experience. They constantly update it. When it comes to their ESG screens, they accept man-made catastrophic climate change on blind faith. There is none of that normal collegial back and forth that would go on in an investment management organization. It's just accepted. Jim, have you ever had at the Heartland Institute, have you ever had an investment management organization come to you and say, we use ESG, we're trying to take into account the increasing severity of hurricanes and tornadoes, how that might affect companies. Now, we read some things, though, that say that this really isn't happening. We'd like you to help us resolve this. I mean, have you ever had that? Do you know of any other of us on this side of the aisle that have had an investment or management organization ask that kind of question? No, I'm not aware of it. No, it's just accepted. There's not the normal back and forth and give and take that would go on. And finally, if you want to flip over to the last slide, as I mentioned earlier, they're very sensitive to this issue. I think the tide is already turning, and I think it's important to not just have the opposition that we've had from states pulling hundreds of millions of dollars away from these organizations, but to have grassroots opposition. And as I said earlier, most people are not aware of this. So it's important not just to invest with companies with minimal ESG exposure, but inform both the companies which you invest with and those which you've rejected what you're doing. And we've set up a process where somebody who invests in our portfolio, we have a ready-made process where they can send off an email. We have all the email addresses, we have the text, and let outfits know we did not invest with you because of your stance on ESG.
Yeah. So, ultimately there is a market correction coming, and it can be accelerated through your own personal choices or not. But, if ESG investing, maybe Linnea and Sterling can weigh in on this, but, when ESG first really gained momentum, it was quite disconcerting because it was the idea that, Vanguard and BlackRock, we're talking trillions of dollars of capital that they control. And, you don't like to think that there are private entities, although in partnership with powerful governments, of course, as well, but that there would be private entities so powerful that they could actually impose upon the world their own vision of what the future should be, and basically ruining companies that they don't smile upon and creating wealth out of nowhere in areas that they do smile upon. And that's why it's, to me at least, it's been very encouraging to see that reality and markets actually do matter still, no matter how big your investment firm is.
And what's really disturbing about what you mentioned was that the overwhelming majority of the people who provided that capital for those firms to invest had no idea that this was going on.
Right.
Linnea may want to weigh in, then I'll get something to say.
Well, I mean, it is something of a surprise when, well, I guess it's not really a surprise but when you get both the government and also all of the largest financial institutions, all of the largest companies, all in lockstep, that's a major problem for I even think that to an extent, if we don't tamp out some of that, relatively quickly, just natural market won't be able to overcome it, because the natural market is being bastardized, right? I mean, if it's not a free market, if everyone isn't playing fair, then us attempting to play fair when you've got China manipulating it and everything, it's never going to work out for us. So there's some effort that needs to be made here, and that's part of the reason why the Heartland Institute has been going after ESG at the state level, trying to make sure that states aren't able to invest their pensions and stuff into these kind of portfolios, because when you have this much power up against you, you have to use some state power to fight it, which irks us as people who have more libertarian leanings and stuff. But I think that at a certain point, you have to play dirty with this.
Well, I guess I'd say 30 years ago for sure, but probably even 20 years ago, companies like BlackRock were what were called passive investors. Their job was to go out and to discover companies that would start growing, produce returns. And so the people that had their money with BlackRock, or the pension funds that had their money with BlackRock, would have good returns on investment. They'd become active investors, by which I mean the companies who they own the stock of, they now show up at their board meetings and their proxy, their annual shareholder meetings, and they say, we want you to do this. And it's not because it's going to return money to all those millions of people who own stock in Exxon or whatever. It's because their leadership has decided this is the world as we see it and as we think it should be. So they are no longer managing for productivity. They're managing for social, political, environmental goals of their leadership. And that's what's dragging them down. That's what's harming them. That's why the states are fighting them. But it wasn't always like this, and it doesn't have to be like this. They could go back. I think they'd have to remove Larry Fink to do it at BlackRock, and probably whoever the leader, certainly the head of Bank of America would have to probably be removed. But they should go back to saying, okay, what are we here for? We're here to help investors make money. And if that's the goal, that should be the goal. They should act as fiduciaries. There should be no political. Now, don't get me wrong. If politics does impinge on markets, if you can see that a political end, let's say you found out that diversity actually boosted profits. I'm not opposed to diversity for diversity's sake. If you want to invest for diversity, you want to invest for environmental things. If those things return on investment, go for it. That's what you should be doing. But what I'm against, and what I think the leadership of BlackRock and everybody else should be against, is using other people's money to invest in things that actually may reduce profits and make people worse off than they otherwise would be.
And trying to hide that.
And trying to hide it. Yeah.
You mentioned activist investing. I mean, they've turned the idea of activist investing on its head. It used to be that a Carl Icahn or a T. Boone Pickens were taking a position in a company that was had been mismanaged in order to help its financial performance and reward the shareholders. Now, as Sterling pointed out, a lot of this has nothing to do with rewarding shareholders. And Linnea, earlier when you were talking about government, industry, nonprofits all marching in lockstep, I don't want it to be too inflammatory, but there's a name for this that I think originated in the years leading up to World War II, and I'll let it go at that.
All right.
You can say it on this show. You can call them fascists on this show. We're allowed.
You did it. I did. I'm wearing a coat and tie today. I can't do that. Coat and tie.
Not fascist. National Socialist.
Yeah.
Look, they don't believe in the government owning the means of production. They keep it in private hands. They just direct what the private hands can do with their means of production.
Yeah, we're pretty fast and loose with the F word around here. That's for sure. So we have time for a couple comments. I don't think we have a lot of questions from our chat today, but Linnea, I know you starred one there. If you want to pop it up there for Don.
We've got a couple. So we've got one from Stan here. I think this one was more directed at Sterling because it popped up while Sterling was talking. While you were talking about the fiduciary responsibility and talking about how if diversity doesn't pay, then you shouldn't invest in it, that kind of thing. And so Stan says, are you all saying profit above all? There are some values that matter.
Lots of values that matter. Hundreds of values that matter. I care about a lot of things, and I put my money where I care. But no one else should take my money and put it in things they care about.
That's right.
Yeah,
and also,
I can invest my own money in all sorts of causes, which I do, that I care about.
Yeah.
But no one else has the right to take my money and decide that since I put it in a company, I put it in that company typically because one day I'm not going to be working, I hope, and I can take vacations when I want to. I can still buy dog food. That's why I invest in companies, to make a profit. And you say, above all, yes. When I invest in companies, above all, profit. When I invest in causes, that's my money, and I do with as I wish.
Yeah, you're going to die.
Companies shouldn't be doing politics.
You're going to die at your desk like a hero, Sterling. I know. You know, you're going to work all the way to the end.
Okay, and also I wanted to point out that Claire Goldsberry sent us a little super chat, so thank you very much, Claire.
Yes, we do appreciate the support for the show. That is for sure.
Okay, next. Is there a shortage of snow in France and Switzerland this year? And I'm going to answer that really fast. There may or may not be, but it's not proof of catastrophic climate change.
I don't. Was I supposed to talk about that or just ESG? Did I miss something?
You can talk about whatever you want. Okay, here, let's see. They're
not short of snow in China and Mongolia this year.
No,
or
they are
Anchorage,
not.
Alaska.
Or the Sierra Nevadas in California.
Yeah.
All right, are Chinese corporations using ESG?
I'm certainly not an expert on that, but I would say that given China's environmental record, there's not a whole lot of E in Chinese companies. That's just a guess.
Yeah, as one of our commenters pointed out earlier, they are probably leaning pretty heavily into the S&G parts, though, for their own cultural values.
Yeah, and it's F for fossil fuel, so it's FSG for them.
Yeah.
But
right.
Though, to be fair, they really support ESG over here.
Oh,
yeah. Oh, of course they do.
We should be doing all the ESG while they keep doing what they're doing.
You're right. All right. Wasn't ESG set up by BlackRock and them as another money-making scam?
That's actually a good question. I was going to touch on something along those lines a little earlier. I think scam is a little strong, but I think we have to understand that the push for this did not come from BlackRock or State Street or any other. It came from nonprofits pushing this sort of thing on these companies, some of them knuckling under, some of them jumping on the bandwagon as a marketing tool. So, I've never been behind the scenes in any of these organizations, so I can't tell you the origin of this, but it really came from nonprofits pushing it and creating a grassroots demand for it from people who believe that CO2 causes catastrophic global warming.
Okay, we have one that's a little bit off topic, but I'm going to show it anyway because we really only had a couple of questions this time. You did a really thorough job, I think, of describing your positions, Don. All right, so we have this one. Does all human activity per year even compare to the amount of energy produced in a single hurricane? That would be a Stan question.
That would be a Stan Goldenberg question.
If he's still in the chat, he can answer that one. I have heard, I don't know exactly what the numbers would be on that, but I have heard that the old commentary that people were making a couple of years ago about nuking hurricanes to put them off track, it would not have any impact on their track whatsoever because the energy of a hurricane is much larger than a nuke.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's going to put a wrap on today's show. I want to thank our very special guest, Don Harrison. Thank you. Yes, you can learn more about him and what he does at capitalinvestment.com.
Capitalist.
I'm sorry.
Come on, Jim.
Capitalistinvestment.com. And also be sure to visit the Heartland Institute's climate websites, climateataglance.com, climaterealism.com, energyataglance.com. Always visit heartland.org, where we have an entire environment suite that has so many great materials for you to learn the truth about what's happening to our climate and some sensible energy policies as well. And also remember, share this show with people. Hit that like button. Leave comments underneath it. That helps us get past the algorithms at YouTube and other places that do not want these kinds of conversations to get out there. Again, I'm your host for today, Jim Lakely, Vice President of the Heartland Institute. On behalf of everybody on the Climate Realism Show, we will see you next week.